Okay, good afternoon, or evening, or morning, whichever time you're watching this. Petroleum Club members, guests, friends, and family. Today, our video is going to be a wine tasting. I know we've had some great videos in the past. We've seen some from tips from the golf shop. We've seen an interview. We've seen some cooking. We saw an interview with Keith out on the golf course and all the snow. As I look out today, quite a bit has melted since that last video. But today, really, it was just we're gonna taste some wine. And so the two wines that we're going to be tasting today are both wines that you can pick up from the club through the P Club plate. Wine number one, the Giusti Valpolicella Rapasso. Okay. And then wine number two is the Pepper Jack Shiraz from the Barossa Valley. And now, one of the reasons I chose the wines today, A, because you can both get them, right? But B, because they're just drastically different, but serve a very similar purpose. Two wines that would be great with steak that are kind of prepared a different way. Maybe I'll talk about that after. But the first wine that I've poured here for myself is the Pepper Jack Shiraz. Now, one of the things about, I guess, my sommelier skill set or how I drink wine or why I drink wine, it's really always just about the region and what grapes do well in the region. And so Barossa Valley, which is in Australia, they do Shiraz the best. It's kind of one of the premier areas of Australia, and Shiraz is really their number one grape. They do some other really, don't get me wrong, they do Cabernet. They do a stunning Cabernet as well, but Shiraz is just really what works best there, right? And so I always try to buy wines that are from a specific region that do a specific grape very well. So Shiraz, Barossa Valley. So I already know that they're going to do a really good job. So some people often ask me, okay, when you're smelling wine, what are you doing, right? And I sometimes give them the answer, hey, you swirl it around, make a lot of sound, and it looks like you know what you're talking about. But really, there's a few things that I look for. Number one is the color, right? What does the color look like? And I'm always looking for, one of the things that I always look for is when I'm tasting a wine and I know it's a Shiraz and I know it's from Barossa Valley, I already kind of know what it should look like. And so even before, and that's just because I've studied it enough, but before I even taste it, before I even open it, before I even smell it, I know that hey, this is going to be a rich, full-bodied wine. It's going to be deep, dark, and purple in color. Right, and so there's some stuff that I start to look for with Shiraz, and that's really, what I do when I taste a wine, right? And so first thing I notice, I swirl it around, and I see this deep, rich purple color, right? Which is okay. Check. That means it's a Shiraz. Okay, it doesn't mean it's a Shiraz, but it checks off that box. The next thing I'm going to go is I'm just going to give it a sniff, and when you do smell it, if you want to truly look like a sommelier and look like you know what you're doing, don't be afraid to stick your nose in, right? Right into the glass all the way. So give it a little swirl and okay. Now, second thing that when I think Shiraz, Barossa Valley, what I'm looking for is rich, deep, dark fruit, right? Those are those big blackberry notes and almost like stewed or figs or prunes, right? And the first thing I get in here is just this big whiff of that dark fruit. The second thing that I get when I go into that glass is I'm getting sort of a little mocha notes and some I can get kind of the smokiness. So from that barrel and from the oak, right? Little toasted notes. Really, really pleasant. Really makes me want to enjoy the glass, right? But it is big. It's not a shy wine. This is a big juicy wine. And so the next step is you've smelled, you've nosed it, you've taken a look at it, you kind of know what to expect now, right? And so anytime I go to the palate, that's all I'm doing is I'm just reconfirming what I already know. And so what I already know is that, hey, it's very fruit forward. There's some dark fruits in there. There's little toasted notes, there's little vanillins, there's some mocha in there, right? And so I just want to make sure that as I taste it, that is also there in the palate. I'm also tasting to see that it's balanced. That, I'd be very concerned if I tried that wine, and then as soon as I tried it, I didn't see any fruit, or I didn't feel any fruit on the palate. Hey, I got a lot of in the nose, but not in the palate. That wine's kind of off balance, right? It's just something to be concerned about. So I'm going to go in, and when you do taste it, don't be afraid. Swirl it around, right? Really get it on all parts of your mouth, right? You want to see how it feels, right? Not just guzzle it. So let's go in. Okay, and my helper here is laughing at me because I'm making the funny sounds, and that's like a party trick too. If you wanna, you stick your nose in there and then you make the funny sounds when you slurp. You just look like you know what you're talking about. But so as I try that wine, wow, big fruit notes, big little sweetness on the front, which is what I expected with all those dark fruits. Nice and subtle, really. Sometimes I get a little bit nervous with Australian oak because sometimes it's very woody, right? And it's like you're chewing on a piece of wood, but very, very nicely rounded, right? A little bit of tannic structure on the top, right? Dries out the palate really nice. And as far as the balance goes with some of the alcohol levels, now this I'm assuming is a little bit richer in alcohol. If I look, I see that's 14.5%, so that's up there on the scale. But I don't really feel that. I don't feel the heat. I don't feel the burn on the end there, right? But very, very upfront, very in your face type of wine. But subtle enough that the fruits are nice and rounded. The mouthfeel is nice and rounded. Really great wine. That really checks off all the boxes as far as a Shiraz for me goes. So I'm just going to put that one aside, and so we're going to go into this next wine. So the next wine, like I said, this Giusti, don't put that too far away because I might need that again, is the Giusti Valpolicella Ripasso. Now, one of the things that's, I guess, kind of confusing about the wine world, and even as a sommelier, I get confused sometimes too, is, the New World wines that we drink, are very, very easy, right? It is, I can see that it's Australia, I can see it's from Barossa, I can see it's a Shiraz, and I can see the year. It's just all labeled right there for me. Now, as I go into the Giusti, right, which, don't get me wrong, great wine. It's Old World, so this is from Italy. It just says Valpolicella, so I'm kind of wondering what's a Valpolicella, right? It says Ripasso, and it does say a product of Italy down there, but it's very small writing. And, then I have to go to the back and look. So just a little bit different labeling, right? And I think really the big reason that we see some of the traditional Old World versus New World is that Old World wines are much further along in their wine knowledge than New World, right? That's really how I see it anyways. And if you talk to somebody from Italy or you talk to somebody from Europe, they just know what Valpolicella is, right? It's just, yeah, I know what Valpolicella is, but, a lot of people in North America or the Western world might not know what Valpolicella is. And it's really interesting because Valpolicella is a specific region within Veneto in Italy, which is north, and this is me going back to my classes, northeast Italy. And so, I just know that that's the region it comes from. I also, because I've studied it, and because, that in Valpolicella, it's going to be Corvina, Molinari, Rondinello, and those are kind of the grapes that they use, right? They don't use something simple like Shiraz, what we know, or Merlot or Cab. Those are the three grapes, and because we're not used to them, we wouldn't necessarily know that. And they don't list it on the bottle either, right? And then we see the Ripasso word, right? And Ripasso is really a technical term of how they made the wine, right? So Ripasso, which I've heard, is baby Amarone or poor man's Amarone, right? And so you take a Valpolicella wine, and so there's really three levels. There's Valpolicella, Ripasso, and Amarone, kind of on a simple scale. And you take a Valpolicella wine, and then you introduce the grape skins, the discarded grape skins of Amarone into that. You create another fermentation process. It adds some richness and some depth in the wine, and it becomes a Ripasso. And so essentially a Ripasso just means you're passing over, or you've repassed over top of already fermented grape skins. Kind of a weird, thing to see in the wine world. It's very common, but on a label for drinking at home, I don't know if we care. I just tell me what's in the glass, right? So that's that wine, and so I believe this one. Don't mark my words, but I think it's Corvina and Rondinello. I could be wrong. I don't know if there's anything else in there. 70-30 splits. I think when I checked last time I checked, but hey, like I said, internet's a great thing. Go and Google the wine, get the PDF notes. That's another party trick that you can do, is go get that PDF, read everything you need to know about the wine as far as the tasting notes from the vineyard, take the wine to the party, do the tasting, and then you're done, right? So we're going to go in and going to start with the color, right? And I can see that this color, it might be hard on the TV right there, but it is definitely a little bit lighter, right? It's not as purple as our first wine. There's a little bit more red, and there's almost a little bit of tawny on the edge there, right? Little brickish sort of color, right? So next thing I'm doing, I'm just going to go in and smell it, right? And right out of the gate again, I do notice that this is softer, right? The aromas aren't kicking me right in the face. I kind of have to go back into the glass a little bit and have to search for it, and that's not a bad thing. That's just the way that the wine's made, right? So just a little bit different style, right? And there it's here we got some dark stewed, plummy, figgy sort of notes. Here we get a little bit more red fruit, right? A little bit more strawberry, raspberry, not young red fruit, but I guess ripe red fruit. And I know that sounds weird, but that's just kind of what I get. And there's little hints of spice, and I don't know what kind of spice it is. I can get the spice. Sometimes I struggle a little bit with spice. And I don't know if it's like little hints of cinnamon in there or what, but I do get some spice. And one of the things I might recommend if you're trying to analyze wine and you're looking at how do I describe it or what am I smelling, one of the things that I always recommend is go on to Google and Google wine wheel, right? And so what you're going to get is you're going to get all the descriptors to help you describe your wine, right? So if you smell red fruit, it breaks it out and says, hey, what are you smelling on red fruit? And so that wine wheel looks, I know you can't see it, but it looks a little bit something like that, right? And it helps you identify some of the things that maybe you don't know what you're smelling, right? And it's just all practice, right? I would say, hey, go drink more wine and practice smelling the wine, practice talking about what you're smelling, right? Or don't, or just drink it, right? Like I'm fine either way, right? But yeah, so yeah, very and just subtle. Geez, really want when I smell this, I just kind of want to get into that glass there. So yeah, and again, my lovely assistant sitting here on the right is cracking up because I'm making the noises, but I'm just trying to draw it all over. And so one of the things I know is, again, dries out the palate really nicely. Not as tannic as that first one. That first one was a little bit bigger, a little bit chewier. This one a lot more subtleness to it, right? But still really dries out the palate. The fruit wasn't as up front. That fruit, that rich strawberry was kind of on the back palate, and that's something that I find is very indicative of old world versus new world, where new world wines, which are wines that aren't from Europe, right? That's kind of how I look at it anyways, is they're usually very upfront. All the body is on the front of the tongue. Where in an old world wine, everything is usually on the back end of the wine. You first start, you don't get that much, and then it's all in the back. But I would say after trying this wine, really just what a great wine this is. The balance, the subtleness, the rich red fruit dries out the palate, the color, the aroma, just everything. It's really really pleasant, right? And so I just swirl it around, and yeah, that is definitely a winner. Not to say the first one wasn't a winner, but this one is really nice. So one of the next questions that I often get to is not just about wine tasting, it's what should I pair with wine, right? And I always say, like, hey, white with chicken, red with red meat, right? It's very very simple. And I, as I was tasting these two and kind of analyzing them earlier, one of the things that really surprised me was I think both these wines, for how drastically different they are, would probably pair very well with red meat, right? Our first glass, which was the Barossa Shiraz, which was rich, big, jammy, stewed fruit, hard palate but subtle, more tannins. It just spoke to me that, hey, this would go really well with a nice juicy steak, right? And maybe a peppercorn demi or something, right? Just a it would be able to cut through the fat of that steak, and it would just balance each other really well. If I go into the second glass, I'm thinking, wow, this would also go with a steak, but maybe just a little bit different style, where more of a, I don't know what it is, but sometimes I eat steak and all I want to have is just a little squeeze of lemon and some nice salt on top, right? And I think that would work extremely well with that wine. So, two totally different wines, both go with steak, maybe slightly paired different. So that in a nutshell is it. I hope you enjoyed today, and I look forward to maybe visiting you again from my kitchen to yours.